Okay. All right. Welcome to the Advanced Apes podcast. My name's Cadell Last. I'm author and creator of the Advanced Apes, and I'm here with two very special guests today, Hisham and Adam Benton. Can you introduce yourselves? Introduce yourselves to the Google Plus community.
Adam first, please.
Okay, yeah, I'm just a third-year undergraduate at the University of Liverpool. I run the blog evoanth.wordpress.com, and I also write for the Advanced Apes.
Welcome to the show.
And my name is Hisham Kelati. I'm a sketch writer with a comedy troupe called QB Kids Productions, and I'm here for comedic relief.
Nice. And before we get into a very serious conversation about radical life extension and the possibilities of that happening in this century, first I need your, out of 10, Hisham, your rating of the 2020 experience. Go.
You know what? I hate to admit this, but I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Why do you
ask me why?
Why do you hate to admit 9 out of 10?
Because I want to say 10, but the fact that there aren't more amazing tracks to listen to gets a 9, all right? JT,
Okay.
You do not make me wait 7 years and only give me 10 tracks. 15 at the minimum.
All right, little hate, that's fine though. All right. Okay, so let's get into it. I wanna first throw out a question to you guys. It's about the idea of radical life extension first, before we sort of get into some of the science behind it. I know for me, I've always viewed aging and I guess just that process in sort of a disease type of way. I've always viewed aging as something that could potentially be cured by science, and it always sort of confused me that scientists didn't talk about it more. So I don't know, for you, maybe I'll throw this out to you first, Adam. Have you ever viewed aging in that way, or when you're exposed to this this aging as a trance literature, did that shock you and confuse you?
Not really. I mean, I think we've been kind of treating almost the side effects of aging for a long time, and so, I don't think it's been like exactly underrepresented in the scientific community or any scientific discussion. It's just that maybe Aubrey's kind of bringing a new way of looking at it rather than, something completely new.
Okay, and Hisham, I'm interested about your perspective as well. In some of the talks done by, primarily Aubrey de Grey, but also other people who are trying to get the scientific community talking about radical life extension a little bit more, they talk about a pro-aging trance where the majority of the population, just as a psychological defense mechanism, assumes aging is an inevitability and can't ever be overcome, so you just accept it, it's part of life, and it's just sort of like an effective way to deal with the fact that you're going to die one day. Do you feel like you're a part of the pro-aging trance, as he would call it, or what do you think of that?
Oh, of course. Originally, when I started listening or watching his TED Talks, my immediate instinct when he started describing aging as effectively a disease that can be dealt with was that, what the hell are you talking about? Aging is a natural thing. Like it's just a predetermined biological thing that happens to everybody. We're born, we live, we die. It's just a cycle that continues on, and it's just something we all have to learn to deal with. And the fact that he was looking at it as a thing that we can actually treat, in this case, if you will, prolong life, it completely astounded me. I'm still a little hesitant.
Right.
But definitely I am committed to the pro-aging trance at this point.
So when you say you're a little hesitant, specifically, what do you mean by that? Do you mean that you're hesitant that it's possible, or that you're hesitant that it's a good idea? Do you see just enormous amount of ethical issues, or are you, it's an immediate visceral reaction to it?
Definitely a little visceral. I wouldn't say it's not doable. Everything science has done 100 years before it was done was undoable. It's whether or not we should be doing it is the issue. Prolonging human life expectancy, or at least from what I was able to understand, the prime years in which we're still youthful, or at least decreasing the effects of aging, it seems, to me at least, a little unnatural, which is, not the best choice of words to use in a scientific dialogue. But I'm still a little hesitant as to the possible ethical ramifications of extending life,
Okay.
or prolonging life.
Adam, let me throw this to you, because Hisham was saying he views aging as unnatural. Do you view it in the same way? Do you think that there are just ethical issues tied into prolonging human life that we shouldn't mess with?
Yeah, there's loads of them. And, when you do hear people like Aubrey talking about, these ethical issues, their kind of attitude is always, well, like, people in the future, they'll deal with it. We won't have, like, this aging stuff for another 100 years, By the time it gets around, we'll have, we've got technology that will deal with, overpopulation and all that. And that just seems to me to be kind of something, surely that's something we should be considering now, rather than just, telling, future people, that's something they've got to worry about, I feel like we should be considering it now, and rather than just dismissing it and, running ahead full steam.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you on that one. I don't think, when we're talking about Aubrey de Grey in particular, I mean, he is a computer science guy. Actually, he's a biology and a computer science guy. He's definitely not an ethicist, and he has no training in the social sciences relevant to discussing and challenging some of these issues. But at the same time, I'll admit my biases on this one, because I would say that I've contemplated the ramifications, the ethical ramifications of radical life extension, and I don't think Aubrey de Grey does a good job of really elucidating some of the important points, and that is, or some of the the potential futures that could come with radical life extension. For me, I feel like if we have a population, or as a species, if we extend our life expectancy to 150, and that means that now we're aging slower than technology is advancing, and then we can live till 300, 600, etc., essentially living indefinitely. I feel like that just means that either we'll have fewer children, which people in the developed world are already doing, and two, you have to account for the technological innovations that will allow us to sustain a larger population on whole. So there's actually no reason to believe that with technological innovation we could support a planet with 10 billion, 15 billion people. It's just the question becomes, where do you get your energy, and how do you reorganize society around individuals that now have radically different aging trajectories? Which, I mean, I guess, Adam, I'll throw this, what's your opinion on those ideas specifically?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about, technological advances, I still think the way that you kind of assume there'll be a solution in the future is a bit iffy. I mean, if you took that approach with kind of anything else, you'd call him crazy. Like, if you say, like global warming, it's like, it'll be another 50 years before like sea levels rise or whatever. And by that time we'll have invented floating cities that will just float them away and it won't be an issue. We don't have to deal with it now. You'd kind of question that a bit, that we're just assuming that technology will deal with it all. And I think that's a bit an iffy way of going about it.
Well, I wouldn't say from my perspective I'm just assuming technology will solve it. I feel like that there are a number of theoretical technologies and technologies that already exist that could radically increase the amount of energy that we produce on this planet. And evidence from the 20th century indicates that when our population expands, we generate the technologies necessary to support that population infrastructure. Sorry, go ahead.
But predicting the future has always been like we've always been notoriously bad at it. I mean, you get people like 20 years ago who thought like the internet would crash and burn within a few years. I mean, I'm not saying there's no chance of technology solving it. I'm just a bit more skeptical than people like Aubrey, David, Nicholas, Jasper de Grey are. That's his full name. He's got more names than Dumbledore.
Okay, so
and a beard almost as long.
Yeah. No, he's a character for sure. Hisham, to you, do you think, as someone who hasn't really spent much time in a science community, do you feel comfortable with the scientific community dedicating time towards ending aging, or do you think this is something it's Pandora's box, we shouldn't open it, we shouldn't go near it?
Definitely Pandora's box. I'm a literal person, so when I see all these different types of diseases that are there, I start ranking them on a sort of hierarchy as to which things science should probably be dealing with now. In this case, maybe genetically modified foods, dealing with cancer, infectious diseases. Aging is like the thing we're all eventually, science, I guess, would lead up to when everything else is fine. It'd be great, I think, if we could extend life maybe like another 10, 20 years. I wouldn't go around saying I want to be 500 years old, but I want the world I'm living in, which I'll be living in longer for, to be a good world. Because at this point, imagine if everybody, if we had the technology right now, where we are as a species, and we all got to live an extra, like, decent 40 years in between. That's just people living longer in war-torn countries who are just going to keep on continuing with these mindless wars. They're going to keep fighting. There are people in Africa who are going to be born and they're going to starve to death, but not going to be starving to death for longer. Like, once again, I'm thinking this literally. It just seems impractical now that we would spend or want to dedicate so much time to being able to extend our lives when the environment we're in is a shitty one.
Okay, Adam, what do you think? Do you think we should do you agree with Hisham that we should not focus on ending aging until we make sure that the standard of living for the entire human population is much higher? Because I think that's what you were trying to say, Hisham.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I think he's got a good. I think you got a good point there. I mean, people have kind of all accepted aging. I mean, you can talk about it as a pro-aging trance, but at the end of the day, people have accepted aging, so it doesn't really matter if we don't do too much about it. We haven't really kind of accepted starvation or accepted warfare. So I feel like that, those are the things that actually, scare us, that we should actually do something about them first.
Okay, so you're saying that because people don't care about aging, or that people don't think about aging in the same way they think and worry about starvation and war, that we should work on those. I don't disagree with that either, but Adam, just to ask you this or to build on those ideas, do you think necessarily that trying to stop world hunger, trying to end world hunger and trying to end violent conflicts between nations, between different groups in the world, is mutually exclusive with trying to stop aging and prolong human life?
No, I think you can do loads of things at the same time. That's the real excuse I have for continuing to study evolution. If we all had to focus on one, if we all had to focus on something practical, I'll be out of a degree, So I think we can do a lot of things side by side, and so I'm not, saying that we should shut down, SENS and, hit the foundation and completely give up on trying to cure aging, because, I mean, a lot of the work they do is just about kind of improving quality of life. I mean, their latest research paper I had to look at was just a preliminary study into kind of reversing basically blindness in mice, and, go for that. That's a great thing. I just think, the way that a lot of people talk about it as though, the be-all and end-all, and that, I think that's just something that we, I think, misplaced priorities a bit, maybe.
I know I'm really concerned about blindness in mice. But no, yeah, that's my perspective as well, as sort of that, these attempts by our species to end, poverty, hunger, stop wars, which I think we're doing an all right job at if you take a look at the historical perspective in terms of the percentage of humanity that is below the poverty line, or the percentage of humanity that has to engage in warfare or is affected by warfare. That's all decreasing exponentially.
We're doing well there.
We are doing well there, and I think that it's only I think it is ethical to continue to put money and research to make sure that some of the best minds, the best scientific minds on our planet, are dedicated towards extending the human experience and not just extending it, but improving the quality of that human experience. And I think SENS research ties into that. And if the logical extension of this research is that we all live till we're 150, I don't think anyone would fight against that.
You say the experience, but like from a Western point, that'd be very nice for me. I'm well off. I live in a really nice environment. I get to do the things I want to do. I have the resources to be able to do as such. But if I were, a 5-year-old kid in, Darfur right now, like I have no access to food. I'm wandering the desert, trying not to get stumble across fighting or whatever, like whatever war is happening in the Middle East or the East Africa right now.
Just a sec. Can I stop you for 1 second before I continue? I just wanna emphasize the fact that you can't generalize Africa. Not everyone in Africa is starving, and not everyone in Africa is in a war-torn area, and not everyone in Africa is has no access to food or clean water. And you have to also realize that Africa is developing very quickly, and that there are a lot of and I've listened to a lot of different talks on the future economy of Africa, and there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, and there are a lot of technologies right now, especially information technologies, that are going to be lifting a lot of African countries out of poverty, and there's a lot of reason to suspect that many African countries will be the next Asia.
Fair enough. Go ahead, sorry.
Right, well then, daytime TV adverts have kind of lied to me there. They always make out that, charities need all the money in the world. But the thing is, though, this isn't like a universal thing where we're just going to kind of raise everyone up. Like you said, it's kind of almost a product of taking care of the side effects of aging, which basically means you need to have the money to pay for medical treatment. So, even if, not everyone in Africa was, starving, even if they're not all trapped in a war-torn country, you still run the risk where maybe like only the rich will be having access to this kind of thing. And, that raises a whole host of kind of extra questions. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you start talking, he talks a bit about kind of almost genetic manipulation on some occasions, and, you wind up with kind of that same situation you had, a few hundred years ago where, the landowners always thought they were better because, they're better breeding and all that. And you kind of wind up with almost a return to that.
I think that's an interesting question to raise, is there are disparities. In the future there will still be disparities. There will be haves and have-nots. There will be people who are wealthier than others. Whether we conceptualize that inequality on a nation-state scale or whether we conceptualize that inequality on a continental scale, I think that they'll surely exist, and I think it's really important that if these if the scientific knowledge does allow us to prolong human lifespan to the 150s, we really have to be cognizant of how these technologies are dispersed and implemented on the ground level, because we can't have a situation, obviously, where there are people in, for example, Cameroon who are living till they're 50, and there are people in America who are living till they're 150. That's just, we can't have that situation. That would be far too much disparity.
Yeah, as well, I mean, there's all kinds of kind of other unintended almost side effects like this, where you have like maybe rich people living longer. I mean, there's that classic joke about the scientific community where basically ideas only change when the old people die off and, a fresh new generation comes along. If the old generation is living till 150, who can say that might still, advance, stop paradigm shifts happening and that kind of thing. There's loads of kind of unintended side effects, and I think a lot of people have a tendency to just dismiss it all as, the trance of pro-aging, when in reality it does need serious discussion.
Okay. So I think we've had a lot of time to discuss the ethical side of this, but onto the maybe more of the science side of the radical life extension science. There are two important concepts I'd like to discuss and get your opinions on, if I could. So the first one is longevity escape velocity, and that's the idea that at the moment and throughout all human history, humans were aging much quicker than technology could prevent that aging process. Mm-hmm. And so we would die at, in the Paleolithic, the average life expectancy was 30. And as we move into ancient times and up to the present day, life extension has slowly risen from the 30s to the 40s, and now in many developed countries we live into our 80s. But we're still aging slower than technology is progressing, but the idea of longevity escape velocity is that at some point in the future, we will be aging slower than technology is progressing,
Yes.
and as a result of that, we will essentially be living indefinitely. Now, life expectancy will never be infinite, but as long as you're aging slower than technology is, you'll be around. Do you think that concept has any validity, or do you think it still has yet to be demonstrated? What do you, Adam? I'll throw that out to you first.
For me, at least, that's where people like Aubrey and the Sense Foundation kind of jump off the deep end. I mean, they're doing this, good work curing blindness in mice and all that, and that's valid kind of medical work. But I think when they extrapolate that outwards and say, within 10 years we'll basically have an immortal mouse, and then within another 10 years after that, we'll have, people living, past the longevity escape velocity. I think that extrapolation is a bit unjustified when you look at the progress they're making. I mean, as great as curing, the blindness in mice is, it's just a preliminary study.
But away from SENS, sorry, just as a concept, does that if say the SENS Foundation is completely off, let's just say that it is. We'll talk about it later, but
I think it's possible.
The concept itself.
I think it's possible, but we're far away from it.
Okay, Hisham, what do you? I know you watched the TED Talk on longevity escape velocity. What did you think?
Yeah, even as someone who doesn't have that strong science background as both of you, or even the guys who are in it, the theory makes sense to me because it is true.
Right.
With more technological advancements, we live a little longer because they help us live a little longer. So inevitably, there will be a point in which technology will be so far ahead that we can actually make us live longer.
Right.
In terms of that time frame, that's a little bit iffy. In theory, it completely makes sense because we do have actual, proof of it happening to, even just us in the last 100 some odd years. But in terms of the rate in which it will occur, maybe a little slower than Aubrey's hoping. But
yeah, I think that's fair. I think the concept makes a lot of sense to me. And just as an example, I think right now I would contend that, say post-World War II society, over the last 50 years, we've all been encountering social relationships and social dynamics that are much different than any humans have ever encountered before. I'm 26 now, and, most of my grandparents are still alive. And I have relationships with them on an adult scale. And that's probably... that was probably exceptionally rare in the past. You probably wouldn't have a situation where most 20-year-olds have an adult relationship with, or have a chance to have an adult relationship with their grandparents. It might seem normal to us because that's the only life we've, been a part of, but it's probably a unique thing in the history of our species. Adam, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, things have been changing recently. And I think that does show that, they can continue to change and probably will in the future. I mean, that's why I think the longevity escape velocity is probably, at least theoretically possible. But then there's the thing, I mean, when you have technology, you're talking about things like Moore's law, about how everything will, double every few years or so. But then you get to the point where basically it's because things are getting smaller, and it gets to the point where basically at the subatomic scale, you can't get any smaller. So there'll be a limit to kind of how far advanced we can get with technology. And so that's the question that, you can extrapolate from the past, 50 years since the war and say things are increasing, but will we kind of run into a similar, almost biological wall where we just can't get any better?
Okay, so let's talk about that biological wall for a second, because the analogy that's brought up among, I think, a lot of scientists is this idea of combating aging via intense maintenance. And that's sort of the analogy that's always brought up is the fact that, take the car, for example, and you could technically keep a car around indefinitely. You could have an immortal car as long as you continually maintain it, and whenever something goes wrong, you just replace it, and you keep it around indefinitely. And so when scientists use that metaphor and they apply it to the human body, are they making an invalid metaphor there? Is it useful in any way? Can intense maintenance, can stem cell therapy be a way to keep us around much longer?
I like the analogy of the car, and it does make sense if you have the resources to be able to keep, I wouldn't say modify, but maintain the car. But the problem is it's that car. It's a 1920s Chevy or whatever. From the time it started up till now, the car has evolved. Instead of running on gas, now they're running on biofuels and may run on electricity. Aubrey is saying at this point, evolutionary, he just wants humans just to continue on, but he isn't allowing the idea of us evolving. He wants the stage we're at to stay, from what I've been able to pick up. But in doing so, if there are pockets of human population, let's say in 10,000 years, who decided not to commit to the extending our lifespans, they may evolve differently than we do. And I'm more pro the evolution, i.e. getting a new car or dumping research into perhaps different types of cars or fuel sources or whatever, than I am, sticking with that one car forever.
Well, I wouldn't say that Aubrey is not conceptualizing future evolution, because he is a singletarian and he does work with the Singularity Institute, and he the SENS Foundation does do collaborative research with technological singularity futurists like Ray Kurzweil or Peter Diamandis. So the idea would just be that evolution is no longer happening generation to generation. It's happening within individuals. We are modifying ourselves with technology and with genetic manipulation, and that is the new evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be leaving to 150, but I'll have a bionic arm as well, which, I can get behind that. I mean, a lot of people talk about, basically how, this kind of stuff is unnatural, how they wouldn't want, a robot brain or whatever. But, I'm sitting here talking on a plastic laptop, wearing my polyester hoodie, what's natural and unnatural, I don't really care about that much. I'll happily have my robot arm. But so that doesn't really concern me. Go with the bionics, go with the singularity, roll with it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you, Adam. I think anyone who brings up this natural-unnatural distinction doesn't really understand that everything that humans do is natural. I mean, we're just as much a part of this biosphere as an ant or a beaver or anything else. There's nothing unnatural about what we're doing. We just happen to be doing a lot of things that have never happened before in the history of the planet and maybe the history of the universe, but it's not unnatural. All right.
This is a very belated ganging up on Hisham for his comment earlier about what's unnatural and natural.
Okay, I think he's...
Yeah, we just get him away.
Left us.
Yeah.
Anyway, while Hisham's doing whatever Hisham's doing, this is maybe more a change in direction of the conversation towards you, Adam, about SENS particularly. Do you feel, and SENS, just for anyone who doesn't know, is Aubrey de Grey's research laboratory.
And you're not going to say his full name there.
Aubrey de Grey?
Aubrey David Nicholas Jasper de Grey.
Yeah, you memorized it. I haven't. I forget. The SENS Foundation stands for...
Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence Research Foundation.
Right, okay. And so there's been a lot of controversy specifically about the science of SENS. Adam, I know you have analyzed this a little bit. What do you think? Do you think it's pseudoscience? Do you think it has any value? Do you think SENS should be shut down? What do you think?
Well, to return to the blind rats again, I should have really learnt more examples rather than keep going back to the same one. But, that's an example of, as far as I can tell, good science. But it is kind of very preliminary stuff, and it's a well-known kind of medical effect that basically you introduce a drug or a treatment or whatever. In the first study, it looks amazing, like it's going to solve all our problems. And as you get better and better controlled trials with larger and larger kind of people in it, the effect shrinks a bit until it's maybe half of what it was to begin with. I mean, that's why you can get a lot of kind of pseudoscience medicine on a small trial with 5 people. It looks like homeopathy works. You do the same trial with 5,000, and it doesn't. So I think they're on the cutting edge here. But Aubrey de Grey himself has come out and said, doing replication isn't really what he and his foundation want to do. They always want to be pushing forwards. And so, they're establishing these good effects, but without the replication, without the bigger trials, there's no way of kind of validating them and determining whether or not they're applicable.
So now with that, I think that was a pretty good analysis of SENS, but with that line of reasoning, Aubrey can always say, well, we're not making the progress we need to be making because of funding.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the problems with his kind of approach, is that he's taking a different perspective to what you kind of classically, when you're dealing with aging, when you kind of go through traditional medical and, that kind of approach. So he's taking a different perspective, so there's not kind of the ready-built funding structures there for him to get, a grant or whatever from. So, I think I can understand his desire to always want to be pushing forwards, because if you've only got a tiny amount of money, you want to be making the most you want to be making the most progress you can with that amount of money.
Right. I think for me, SENS, I don't know if I think SENS is going to be that organization that really develops the breakthrough we need in aging research. And mainly the reason I say that is because I sort of agree with a lot of Aubrey's critics that he formulated a theory and he's trying to get data to fit that theory, as opposed to generating the data and then forming a theory around the data he's produced.
Yeah.
And so that's not...
He's got his 7 kind of deadly things that he says cure aging, and his basically justification for saying that's like the be-all and end-all is that people have been looking at it for like 30 years, 30, 40 years, and haven't found anything new. And yet, if you kind of took that approach with a lot of other things, especially with kind of evolution, what I deal with, you'd just be laughed at. Like, we found Lucy and Australopithecus, in the 70s, and we've been digging up in Africa for, the 40 years since then. I can't count. Spending thousands of man-hours, millions of pounds in investment digging up Africa, finding more fossils. For ages, we didn't find another species that lived side by side with Lucy. And then recently we did. So you never know what's going to be just around the corner. So there could be an 8th or a 9th thing of aging, and I think he's being a bit dismissive there.
Right, and I think that's the main issue. So also I said that I don't think SENS is necessarily, with their current approach, going to be the ones that are going to come up with the big aging breakthrough. But where I think SENS has value and where I respect Aubrey is in the idea that he's really trying to popularize this idea that aging is a thing that can be cured. I actually like his line of reasoning where he says 100,000 people a day die from aging, and I think it hammers home the idea that aging is a thing. It's not inevitable, and I like that he's trying to get that idea out there. And I like the idea that he's trying to change everyone's perspective on what aging is, because there are animals out there, believe it or not, that have negligible senescence. And Hydra's the most interesting example of animals that have actually evolved to not age. They die of other things, but they don't age. So I think it's possible. I think it's something scientists should be committed to. And if SENS and Aubrey de Grey going around and talking on TED is a way to get people to pay attention to it and to make it a valid scientific area of inquiry, I
heard a recent interview with Aubrey, and he's basically saying how he's basically, being a media whore full time now, that he's delegated the research to other people in the SENS Foundation, and he's just going around doing the TED Talks, trying to get funding. He's like doing the PR side of things himself, because obviously everyone wants to see, a guy with a beard like that on stage.
Yeah, no, his image. Hisham, what do you think the image is the key to Aubrey's popularity? Like, obviously he's selling an idea that has a lot of emotional resonance with people.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is going to get you that attention. But I mean,
yes.
his image, he's generated a certain persona that is important.
Yes. Personally, I found the fact that he looked the way he does to be detrimental to the cause.
Oh, yeah?
I'd much prefer him in maybe not the, as Adam was saying, the double door beard and the grungy T-shirt, looking like he just came out of his mom's basement after a really long, shroom trip. But I do like the way he engages the audience. I like the way that when he basically it's just he's easily engageable, especially with his TED Talks. So I personally would give him the benefit of a doubt. I just wish maybe he would go to a barber. That's just me, though.
Yeah, he's charismatic, he's confident, and that's a great boon. But it's also kind of on the downsides because it does mean he kind of does overstate. I think he does overstate how confident he is that he's going to get to the escape velocity within the next 20 years. It's great for being charismatic, but he gets a bit carried away, I think.
Right, and so maybe that is a recipe for a lot of popular attention, but it might not be a recipe for scientific respect. At least in the. Sorry, go ahead, Adam. Yes.
You're not going to make headlines by going, well, maybe perhaps we'll get aging cured within 100, maybe a few years. I don't know. It would be the same.
Right. No, that's not going to be a headline that anyone wants to print. And so this is maybe more a problem with popular science. And I don't want to take this whole conversation off course to the degree where we start analyzing popular science, but it goes without saying that if you're trying to communicate science research to the masses, you want a bold headline that just jumps out, and ending aging is something that's going to sell. But I guess to wrap up the talk, I just sort of want to get maybe both Adam and Hisham. I'd love you to just sort of say, when you've been doing your research on Aubrey de Grey and the idea of ending aging, what do you take away from what you've learned? If anything, what did you take away from this conversation? Adam, I'll start with you.
The big thing I took away from this conversation is that more people seem to be a bit against him than I realised. Whenever I've heard interviews or talked with him, everyone seems to be like, yeah, get rid of aging, it's great. And then Hisham's come along here and he hasn't been 100% pro-Aubrey. And so it's nice not to be in the minority and have you two gang up on me. It's nice to gang up on, Cadell instead.
Yeah. I'm used to it, honestly. Whenever I talk about the future and whenever I talk about ideas about, from prominent futurists, usually I'm seen or perceived to be so optimistic as to be the one that ends up being ganged up on. So I'm used to that. But Hisham.
We'll have to do it more often then.
Yeah, definitely. So Hisham, what do you think? What do you take away from this?
Personally, I have absolutely no desire to live forever. Especially the way I live, I'll probably peak at 65. My big issue is the cultural impact currently of extending our life expectancy. I don't think we are, as a species, culturally there to be able to do this. I think if this was to happen, we'd have to evolve. We'd have to become slightly more loving to one another, just overall. But, for example, stem cell research. The fact that we have such a stream of research in science that could deal with a majority of the diseases, chronic or infectious or whatever, but as a culture, we can't get over the idea of the origins or the misconceptions of stem cells research. Now imagine extending our lives. Culturally, we're nowhere near being able to handle that, and I think that will have to be something we deal with first before we go around giving everyone extra 200 years to live. Okay,
the eternal pessimist. That's why we have you on here, Hisham.
Yeah.
We gotta have you balancing out the optimism. So it's a good mix. It's a good mix, and I had a lot of good times. I thought it was a good conversation. For me, I think from doing this research and having this conversation, what I realized is that I still feel like the ideas and the ability to radically extend life expectancy this century are within reach. I think that we have to be hypercritical of anyone who's actually doing the research itself, and we need to make sure that the entire scientific community is paying a close attention to the people doing the research itself to make sure that the public isn't going to be misinformed, so that we can tell what is real science and what is pseudoscience. And that's the key, I think, for everyone to look out for. But anyway, Adam, where can people find you and on Twitter and your blog?
Well, I've been pimping myself out almost as much as Aubrey. You can find me on my blog at evoant.wordpress.com, on Twitter at evoant. I write on the Advanced Apes as well, and I've just started a Facebook page for the whole thing, Evo Space Ant.
Okay, and Hisham, what about you?
You can find me and my hilarious comedy at www.qbkidsproductions.com. Follow us at QBKids on Twitter and Facebook us at QBKids. Like our fan page, and I promise I'm much funnier in real life. I swear to God.
He's lying.
Somehow I don't feel, the topic of, death and aging is the best one for comedy, so I'll give you a break this time.
Sweet.
All right. Oh yeah. Hisham will be funnier next time.
Yeah. Next time, you don't get another chance after this one.
All right. Fair enough.
All right, and you can find me on theadvancedapes.com as well as on Twitter at theadvancedapes and at Cadell Last. And thank you both for coming on the video cast. It's our first video cast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I hope to have both of you back. And if you want to watch live, you're probably watching this on YouTube, but if you want to watch live, we're going to be starting a video cast every Sunday at noon. So tune in. You can tune in live. We do it on air on Google+. And otherwise, you can just subscribe to the YouTube channel for more cool videos. All right. Thanks for watching, and thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks for having us, Cadell.